It's a time for more packages from China. Let's go. The Mushroom of Doom. Oh man, I love these wicked Sega peripherals, these upgrade things. But this is actually something you should actually consider, because when you're looking at, like, the different ways we can play with different kind of custom games, but then of course we're having all the PAL shenanigans I have over here and the US market, all kinds of very cool things you can play. But can we attach this to the custom Sega console? That's what we're going to be testing out today. I wouldn't really recommend doing this because it makes no sense. I would just reuse the original Sega 32X on your original system, but it's a thing laying around, so let's test it out and have a lot of fun. So in the end, when you're going to be looking into this custom Sega version, well, it's convenient that we have an original connection of the Sega. However, meaning that we can actually plug in, let's say, the Sega 32X. But this is something I will not really recommend doing, because when you're going to be looking into the support of it. So normally this device has a plastic support, what you can see over there, or at least if the lighting is right, you can see that this is a plastic for the Mega Drive 1 or Mega Drive 2, giving it, like, say, the best support you can get. With this it doesn't work at all, so you do have a lot of, let's say, vibrations going on. So moving this thing around actually by playing is very dangerous in my opinion. But nevertheless, we're going to be very careful today, and we're going to be playing some game, because this thing can be switched between different regions, and it's quite interesting because this is a PAL system, and if you're going to be using a PAL, let's say, Sega 32X, we have some interesting thing that we discovered when actually using this on an original Sega US. The construction of the cables is always quite interesting, where we're having all these weird things going on. So over here is actually going to be communicating with the cable, going to the 32X, and then going to be looping to actually the monitor itself. But the first part, I'm going to be using a cheap RGB cable from China. Okay, so for the first part, we're going to be using everything PAL over here, we're having the game implemented, and we're going to be turning on the system. And the first thing I'm noticing is that you can see a lot of interference on the display. I also had this issue when it comes to playing the games in general of the 32X on my Sega. So I was thinking maybe this is a shielding problem, but that wasn't the case. So recently I purchased a pile of different cables. I was just done with those cheap stuff, so I went to retro gaming cables. I had a couple of old ones laying around, and I can tell you this is a Mega Drive 2 version with all kinds of different, maybe fun to make a video about later on, but this is a world of difference, simply because if you're going to be plugging this thing, the following thing happens. But when you're going to be looking into the same setup when it comes to the console, also when it comes to the region, let's turn it on. And now you will see there is no interference on the display. And a simple solution by getting a good cable, quality cable, is absolutely day and night difference. And I'm very glad I spent some money on these cables, because this is going to be the overall experience of the Sega. And if you're going to be using this on an LCD, it looks great, but also on a CRT, it's going to be looking even better. Okay, so what's going on over here? So we're having a PAL setup over there, but let's say we're going to be pushing in the buttons for different region. That's the only thing I can do with this particular product, otherwise I have original systems. And you can see that it did show some Sega logos, but it doesn't do anything else. So let's switch to a different region. Again, the same logo, we're having a different game. But what is interesting, that when you're going to be looking into a different region console, the blocking is going to be done by the Sega 32X, the PAL system. But if you're going to be switching to just a game this is actually a region game locked, this does work with the 32X. So actually the 32X is more like when I say converter, more like a pass-through. But if you're going to be playing 32X game, then we're going to be having a region problem when it comes to that. But if you're going to be using a US version of the Sega 32X, then we're actually going to be having no problem whatsoever. So this is one of the reasons why I'm going to be switching to PAL. And yeah, you can sometimes, I think it's even possible to modify the 32X PAL version. Not going to be doing that, but we can actually enjoy yourself some Sega 32X, and it looks absolutely amazing, even on an LCD. I know CRT is the main way to play, but still, an LCD display looks absolutely great when it comes to that. I think it's kind of cool that we have a clone system, or that's really clone. Sorry, I need to say it's like I need to correct myself with it. It's actually a new PCB with original chips. And how cool would it be if they were going to be releasing some Neptune-made device from AliExpress? I think a lot of people would be interested in it. Let me know in the comments, would you be interested in a Neptune version, even with a crystal clear case or something else. But again, this is absolutely a lot of fun when it comes to playing this old school 32X. I'm just going to be honest, I'm just doing this as for the video, just to slap this thing on there. But I'm going to be actually using this 32X on my original system, my Mega Drive one, because that still will be my favorite like system to use. But again, so it's kind of interesting to see if you're going to be switching out different games, different regions. Man, I really hate PAL at this moment. What happens if you're going to be using a PAL game in a different completely region? We're going to be having a message that this game isn't supported. So what is kind of interesting, having these, let's say, new games with the new games. So this is just a general label. I also have one for the US, but it doesn't really matter because these games are actually region free. The difference is that we do have a different kind of, let's say, screen size. With the right RGB cable, we're going to be having the Doom game. This is by the way the older version. This is the latest edition with some new add-ons, but it doesn't really matter when it comes to the overall performance. So far I understand at least. So yeah, this looks absolutely awesome for a Sega 32X. So let's go to the video. Everything has been set to the maximum over here. And we do have full screen and everything else. So let's switch back to the PAL version. Doesn't do anything because now it's going to be messed up. Let's put in the buttons, everything is going to be set to PAL. And so I did like some side-by-side comparison actually with the CRTs, and connecting both of the Doom games together with this newer version was absolutely awesome. But you can just see now, and this is one of the reasons I freaking hate the PAL system, we're having the black bars. And if you wonder, can you adjust this with the in-game settings? Yeah, not really. You're actually like completely into a massive problem when it comes to that. Kind of interesting that they did remember my less settings. That's kind of cool, even switching and disconnecting everything. So when it comes to that, this is absolutely awesome. But you do have two black bars, and man, I really hate that. And you also see that on the CRT. Nevertheless, everything seems to be working just fine. So that concludes this video about the Sega 32X and the Sega AliExpress machine. That was absolutely a blast to the past and a lot of fun messing around with different regions. Man, I really hate PAL, by the way. So I'm going to be switching to a different region simply because it's so much more convenient and looking better. And with the right cable, we don't have any issues whatsoever. Thank you all for watching. Consider subscribing, and it would be great just to see you in the next video.